Good afternoon and welcome back to EduWeave Online Education Expo. We are having another very interesting panel discussion lined up for you, and we've got some expert panelists here today again with us. So this panel discussion is about education challenges faced by relocating parents, and we have a very august panelist who are going to discuss this with us. Just for the information of the panelists and for the visitors who have just joined us now, EduWeave is an online expo organized by the largest online community of parents. We have 56,000 members who support each other in making education decisions. So this is the third expo that we are conducting, wherein we are trying to bring the 5 pillars of education together, which is education institutions, educators, students, parents, and service providers. In this, we've conducted a few panel discussions yesterday, and we are having quite a lot more happening today. And we are also happy to announce that most of this backend activity that you see happening have been done by our student volunteers. So let me introduce one of the student volunteers who's going to introduce the panelists for you. So welcome, Kirtana, to introduce the moderator for the day. And Divya, please take it from there. Over to you, Kirtana.
Thank you, sir. Today we have our moderator, Divya Sundarajan, who is a free-spirited, out-of-the-box thinker, a firm believer in freedom of expression, and deeply committed to education as a lifelong process that ties up various challenges of living into a seamless learning zone. She is currently pursuing a degree in psychology and holds a master's in computer engineering. She weaves her various learning and interests into learning experiences for children through her workshop under the umbrella Make Believe Be, where she is a co-founder. Her workshop topics range from cooking to woodworking and many things in between. So over to Mrs. Divya Sundarajan.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Kirtana. Welcome to everybody who's here. This panel is going to be about challenges faced by relocating families, that is families who, perhaps have an Indian descent and have moved outside of India and for various reasons are back to India. And, while we've been out of India, things have changed and we come back. Probably some of them left as students and are coming back as parents for students and, are very familiar with the changes that has happened in this time frame. So without much ado, let me introduce the panelists that we have here with us today. Firstly, I would like to introduce Ms. Pallavi Mishra. She's a principal at Oak Ridge, IB evaluation leader, and has been awarded top 50 principals in India by Education Today and ULAKE's Wall of Fame. Also featured as top 20 leaders in education by CEO Insights magazine. She has close to 2 decades of experience in international curricula, and she's an IB evaluation leader and has successfully spearheaded the authorization process for all 3 IB programs, establishing the first IB continuum school in Chennai. And she has, if that's not impressive enough, she has a master's degree in English from Miranda House at Delhi University and business leadership program from the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. We welcome you, Ms. Pallavi. Next on the panel, we have Ms. Bindu. She is a dynamic educator and is in her 8th year in education leadership. She's played a key role in successful implementation of the IB PYP program and was instrumental during the authorization and evaluation process of the PYP program at Oak Ridge International School, Bangalore. Nitasha is in, we welcome you, Bindu, and I'm going on to Nitasha now. Nitasha is an architect by qualification and a public speaker by passion. She's been a Toastmaster for 2 decades now. For the purpose of this forum, I would like to introduce her as the admin of a very supportive and very energetic Facebook group called Return to India Moms, which facilitates moms moving back to India with their various challenges. One of the prominent ones of which is, finding the school and how do I make this process easier for my child. And, it started as a group of 20 friends who were considering moving to India in 2017. And today it's got a strength of about 10,000 women. Professionally, she's an edupreneur, and she would also introduce herself as a teen mentor and is on a journey to empower children with confidence and leadership through her startup We Talk, a public speaking program for children from ages 6 to 16 years. We welcome you, Natasha, and I look forward to the conversation that we are going to have on this topic of relocation challenges. Yeah. Okay. Natasha, my first question would be to you in terms of what are some common concerns, especially in the context of schools and curriculum, that come up in your Facebook group, right? You must have seen some trends and some common emerging patterns. If you could, share some with us.
Thank you, Divya, and a very warm hello, good afternoon to the fellow panelists. I'm honored to be sharing the stage with all of you here. Yes, Divya, this, of course, Return to India Moms is a group supporting 10,000 plus women today. And the most important, the most critical part of the relocation process is education of the children. So some of the common trends, some of the most common challenges are cultural integration of the children. I will elaborate on that a little more a little later. The admission processes, not having enough clarity on the admission processes. Not too many, I think people coming from my own personal experience living in the US, I think people are so used to just Googling up information or looking up websites to get everything at the click of a button. That is another challenge that they face. Of course, another challenge is the choice of board. I think when most of us left India, there was just the CBSE board and the ICSE board. And when they come back, after having had an exposure abroad, the question is, what board do I choose? So the top three concerns, like I mentioned, are cultural integration, admission processes, and the choice of board.
Thank you, Natasha. I think, as someone who has moved back to India after staying outside, it is especially stressful when you're moving back. And, you're very right. Like, these are like the top things on our minds when we move back, right? Perhaps, Pallavi, with your experience in IB, would you say that, R2I families, you feel like, they approach IB schools quite often?
Yes, you're quite right. And as I was listening to Natasha, that's so true. We tend to Google everything, and we all know that everything on Google may not be authentic, and it can be manipulative, and it can be. So one has to be careful. And yes, definitely IB is the preferred curriculum across the world at the present time. We have about more than almost close to 6,000 schools which have taken across the world, which have taken IB, either one program or all the programs. There are 4 programs in IB. Mm-hmm. And so it is definitely something on which the NEP is modeled, the National Education Policy, which is now going to be launched into 2023. It is entirely modeled on the IB philosophy, and that's the vindication of the fact how authentic and how enduring and how futuristic this curricula is. And in fact, the government schools are now trying to sort of emulate this education model, which is very which is based on skill development and not just content retention. And in that sense, it's the best choice for any family who's looking to get children ready for the future, because the future is very dynamic and very unpredictable at the moment.
All right. So it looks like not just for R2I families, but perhaps, across the spectrum, IB is gaining more popularity, but specifically like for people moving back also, it might have like that comfort factor of like, perhaps, this has something more comforting for my child.
Just to add to what you, sorry, Divya, I'm sorry to just add one more point, is that IB, because it's international, that's why it was launched in the first place, because it's for this families which are moving countries. And so you don't have to worry about, okay, I have to finish this year, then I can join. IB is designed in such a way for the floating population that you can pick up the thread from any other school which is also offering the same course. There's a lot of flexibility in the subject combination also. So it is actually structured and conceptualized and designed for the international population, which is not, which is demographically, always evolving.
I like how you mentioned about the floating population, and perhaps, one of the possible reasons that IB is gaining popularity is that there is more and more a floating population, and people are, not necessarily, with all the modernization that we have and communication, it does happen more than what it used to. So perhaps you could tell us about the admission process, especially for people reaching from outside the country, because like Nitasha mentioned, that is something that, is on the minds. Like, at what time should I be reaching out? Is there like a cutoff time after which, the schools do not offer admission? Those are all like things on the parents' mind.
That's a great question, Disha. So that's exactly, and it's a good segue from what I was saying earlier. There is a lot of flexibility in terms of admission, because it is not there's no cutoff date. So you can even move in the third term, and that's fine, and you'll be assimilated in a school that offers this same program. Also, it is there is no such thing of no filtering of students that happens in IB. So there is a clear recognition that there are different ability groups, and children don't have to be only good in English, math, and science. They can have, different abilities. And for that reason, the assessments are designed for learning, not off learning, which means that we look at what the child knows. The prior knowledge of child is really something which is valuable when we are doing admissions. It's not what they don't know, but what they already know, and how it's the right culture fit, and also bringing in international mindedness. For all these reasons, the process is very straightforward. If I have to sum it up in 2 lines, all the IB schools offer admissions on an online platform. So there's an admission inquiry form. You just fill that form. You will have somebody get back to you very soon. And nowadays, in the times of the pandemic, we've been extremely innovative, and there are VDMs, virtual discovery meetings with the admission officers. You get to meet the teachers, you get to also participate in class and observe. So the process is very straightforward, easy, and it is very supportive of the fact that that every family is different, and we have to, it's very empathetic. It is not something which selects, rejects. That's not the approach at all. The approach is aspirational, that if we are here, how do we take the child to the next level? And in that sense, very supportive. Yeah.
That actually answers my next question, which was, what about people who move in the middle of an academic year? I think it's fantastic that, the curriculum in itself supports such moves, because, it would be very limiting if we had to like wait for the next school year to begin, to start educating a child in the middle of a move. And, that's quite a relief, I would say, to know that I can move any time of the year, and I can still find a school in India, in Bangalore, a good school that I can put my child in, right? So that's really well thought out. Bindu, my next question is to you, as to what are the challenges you see most commonly with kids who have moved, again, primary years, the primary head. You can tell us more about, in the primary years, kids who have moved. What are some challenges that they face, which you have seen in your experience? Bindu, I think you're muted.
So basically, Divya, what we have seen is, there are not challenges as such, but it's usually the apprehension that the parent feels, right? They come, there is a lot of presumption. They start thinking, okay, what if this doesn't go well? Or what am I going to do? What if my child does not adjust? That's the primary concern that we have. But what we have seen is, yes, in terms of language, as we have spoken about earlier as well. Languages are a concern amongst the parents. How will children adjust? But once they get into the system, the nature of the program, the nature of the environment is such, the culture of the place is such that, within few weeks of time, all these apprehensions are solved. So they come with so many worry. They have not just one interaction with the school, but multiple times. They need assurance and reassurance. I think all the approach that we must have, like as Ms. Pallavi mentioned, a very empathetic approach, a loving approach, and just telling the parents that the 2 sentences, don't worry, we are there for you. So that's all that matters here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, it's something that parents can relate to. Probably we are more nervous on the first day of school for our kids. And, even through the moves and everything, I'm sure the
So
anxiety.
Divya, I just want to add on one point. So what we do is we don't wait for the children to come to school, experience, and then be comfortable. So, before that, there are multiple interactions that happen.
Oh,
Now children have started coming to school to meet us in person. So by the time they have their first day in school, they are comfortable. That's how the whole system is designed.
oh, is this something that Oak Ridge specifically does, or is this something like recommended by IB as just like a recommendation, not a requirement, but a recommendation from IB, or is this something that Oak Ridge is taking?
Ms. Bindu, is it okay if I answer this?
Definitely, ma'am. You're the right person to answer that.
All right. So, Divya, I'm glad you asked that question. So, yes, there are no such prescribed methods by the IB for the schools. The schools are independent to make these choices. This is our choice because our school culture is such that we recognize that everybody has individual needs. And we recognize that families are going through a bit of a transition challenge. And at this time, to ease off, the burden on their shoulders, we go an extra mile, we make connections, we identify their deep needs. Because, for example, sometimes a parent in our interaction doesn't even know what it is that they really want for their child. They just want the best school. But what qualifies as a best school is something we unpack for them. That best school doesn't necessarily mean the best infrastructure. Yes, infrastructure is good and preferred, but then it also means human relationships that the child will have with the teacher, the enduring learning that will happen, which the child can relate to real life situations, and a pathway to a university, a great university. So these kinds of things are definitely which are unique to Oak Ridge, because as a school, we are part of Nord Anglia Education. Nord Anglia Education has 76 schools across the world. So you can imagine the legacy we carry. And because of this network of 76 schools across the world, there's a premiumness attached to it. And premiumness is not in terms of just infrastructure. And yes, we are tied up with MIT, UNICEF, and Juilliard in New York, but that's not all. We are also, our core belief is that child safeguarding, child's emotional well-being, those are, if they are taken care of, and so for the teachers, because we believe that happy teachers make happy students.
So it's like your overarching philosophy for the children,
this is
for the parents, and also for your teachers. That is,
yes,
that consistency is very, it's important. Like it is uniform across the board. So it also makes it that much easier for your teachers to offer that to your students, I would presume.
I think you summed it up beautifully. It is our overarching philosophy, definitely in Oak Ridge, Bangalore, because for us, it's very important that all stakeholders are equally engaged. So normally you will hear schools talking about being student-centric, but our Oak Ridge vision is about engaging with all stakeholders, which means parent, teacher, students. Because unless you can't create the perfect learning environment unless there's the best synergy between these stakeholders. And that's the role of the admin. So that's how we approach it, so that as much as possible, we can definitely implement the philosophy, IB learner philosophy, not just simply, give the best education, but also create the safest, most supportive learning environment.
Very nice. Natasha, from a parent's viewpoint, and as R2I admin as well, what do you could you add on to what Ms. Bindu shared about like the challenges, or perhaps you could tell about the cultural integration difficulties that you just mentioned.
Thanks, Divya, and thanks, Bindu and Pallavi, for kind of, putting to rest some of the challenges that we as parents do face. I'm appreciative of the fact that Oak Ridge is actually addressing a lot of it, because these are some of the biggest concerns that have come up. And IB may be, IB schools or IGCSE schools may probably be more appreciative or more exposed to the cultural norms of the world outside. But the challenge that most children who are moving, of course, not everybody can afford the cost of an IB school. Those are, again, that's another concern that some relocating parents do face, the prohibitive costs of the international schools. But that aside, there's always the concern, like Ms. Bindu mentioned, about the language. My child cannot speak Hindi, my child cannot speak the local language. How important is it mandatory? That is a big question. Is cursive writing mandatory? Because in the US, at least where we were, it was an optional, and children still write in print, and which is totally acceptable. Rote-based learning, is it all cramming and rote-based learning? The academic stress, those are some of the common concerns which I think an IB school may address, but there are still the other boards also where some of the parents do choose to put their children, and that becomes a bigger issue that we face as parents. Added to that, I also, when I was talking about the cultural integration, in the US, the children are way too soft. I'm sorry to say that. They are in a very, very protective environment. Every child from a pre-K is taught about the bubble of influence, that nobody really enters your personal space. And here in India, I've been here now for 3 years. So I'm very comfortable with just cramming with people, getting into a crowd and enjoying the whole hustle and bustle of India. But that is a big thing for our children when they move.
But isn't it like such a big part of the Indian experience, that is also something that makes us like warm and receptive, and we don't have to like necessarily have appointments for play dates, that was something.
Exactly. But in school, when the children are, I think coming from, especially for the little ones, the pre-primary or the primary kids, they are so used to everything being disciplined, everything being in order. And then suddenly you put them into a culture where it's, of course, eventually they kind of start loving it. But initially it is very, very overwhelming. The loud teachers, the loud children. My own son has now become a totally integrated. You wouldn't even say that he's a US born kid and he's lived there for 8 years of his life. But those are some of the concerns, that when I talk about cultural integration, and unfortunately I feel is, and which I've heard from other parents also, that not too many teachers are really aware of the cultural ecosystem that the children are coming from. That they are actually, the reason the child is overwhelmed is because he's never been exposed to it. It's not whether he likes it or doesn't like it. It's he's never been exposed to it. Eventually he will, they're resilient. It kind of just grows on them. But so that is what I meant by the cultural integration, a little more awareness of both cultures, where the child is coming from and where the child is coming into. So working hand in glove with the parents, I think, is a great philosophy, which you're already embodying. So.
Yeah, I think one thing that I want to take away from what you said is, over time, children's resilience wins over the challenges. Most of the cases, and it's about like how we as parents and teachers can make that process easier. It does happen, but I would like to hear about how IB schools, like you mentioned, may be more sensitive to these. I would like to hear more about, like, let's say, for example, cursive writing, right? I think for primary parents with like kids in primary years, that is a concern. They don't write as much and they're not so used to cursive writing. And, should I now start practicing that at home for him? And, I would love to hear Bindu or Pallavi's thoughts on this.
All right. So when you talk about particularly primary, that's the time, children enter into the school. There is so much of their cognitive, the cognitive energy that takes control of this entire production of letters. So for a parent, it just seems like, okay, my child is not putting that A the way I want him to put, or the way I learned it, decades back. That's something we need to completely change our mindset on. So our approach is very, very different. We have a lot of focus on illustration, because letters eventually have evolved out of, drawings, pictures, lines, right? So that is where even a grade 5 student, if I have to talk about a 10-year-old child, he has the freedom to illustrate what he thinks, right? His understanding can be as a piece of art. So
How
we don't
freeing
actually,
is that, right? Like so much freedom when you can just, express without being bound by rules.
absolutely. And though, yes, the local community, there's a need for writing, and we also cater to all the needs of the society right now, the community, the local community, but we make sure we don't force our children into cursive writing particularly. There are two aspects here. So when we run our, our philosophies or methodologies completely based on the inquiry method. So when we ask our children to inquire, research, and a certain piece, say, for example, he must write a certain, a small summary on his migration experience. He has relocated from US and he's coming to India, or from Australia and coming, living in India. Now, when I'm asking the child to write, he cannot, I cannot force the child to focus on his spellings or on the cursive writing or the handwriting. At that point of time, his flow of thought is what matters to us. So we have that freedom. Once the flow of thought, the absolute, the cognitive energy is streamlined, then we might probably ask the child to be more legible, to try. He and his family is interested, but from our side, we do not force children to write cursive.
Okay, that is one of the checklist I think like parents would have, that they can like strike. Okay, I don't have to teach cursive if I'm moving back to India, sort of a thing. But more on language integration. What about like there are like two aspects to it, right? One, language integration in terms of second language, how they how would they cope up with perhaps not learning the basics of a second language, and the second would be how they are like, even though it is English, a child coming back from outside the country would have a very distinct accent, which could be a barrier in the school. So one, I would like to know how the second language, they barely know Indian English, and Hindi may be a few words to like talk to their Hindi or the regional base. Hello, am I here? Yeah. So one is I would like to know about the second language part of it, and the other is the child's accent and the challenges that brings to the learning.
Since you've not named anyone, I'm going to grab this question.
Sure. It is an open forum, so I would love to like hear thoughts.
So Divya, we have something called international mindedness. Our entire curriculum and our entire approach to teaching and learning is based on international mindedness. And if I have to sum it up in a phrase, international mindedness means accepting differences. Difference in accent, difference in ethnicity, difference in race, religion, all are fine. Equality and diversity, inclusion is at the crux of what we do in school. So it doesn't matter. In fact, I have gone as far as this, where parents have said, oh, this is an accent, this teacher has a Gujarati accent. I said, well, that's part of how English has evolved. You can have a Japanese English, you can have a Australian English, you can have an American English. Why should one be better than the other? And why should we accord more status to one type of English? Because economics is behind it. English from US is suddenly more popular because there's power, economic power associated with it. But I have been able to sort of distill this and make people understand that English is a universal global language. It's the language of business, and that's why the instruction is in English. It's a tool of communication. It is not the be all and end all, and it is something that is has proven to be the most adaptable way of conducting ourselves across the world. And that's why English absorbs words from all languages across the world. Yes, so international mindedness is something that definitely takes away all these fears. Will my child be able to? Cultural integration happens so seamlessly because a large, I think 30% of our students are American passport holders, and so are our teachers, including myself, where I'm not an American passport holder, but I've lived there for more than 3 years and I've experienced that life firsthand. And so many other teachers of ours who have moved from US and they have their children in our school and they're teaching. So in terms of cultural integration, it is not a problem for sure. In fact, it is very systematically a process of opening up the child to the world, where you accept regional differences, international differences, because if that's the whole part of being a global citizen. You cannot be a global citizen if you are not able to accept diversity in the world. And you think
And I like how you are like making it a two-way street, It is not just the child who might come with an accent, the teacher might also come with an accent.
Yes.
And it is absolutely, about accepting both. If a parent has a concern about a teacher's accent, well, that is as this one. I really like that approach that you have mentioned in this context. But sorry, please go on.
Thank you.
And we'll pause and, take that in and, appreciate it for
thank you,
clarity of thought.
I'm glad. I've always found the younger population more open to being this flexible. Whereas I went to a convent and we were taught to enunciate words in a certain way, English, which was Queen's English. But those days are gone and we might as well accept it. So international mindedness is not about aping any culture, but accepting all cultures and understanding that all cultures have their place in the world. All of us coexist. And if we are unable to instill this kind of a value system in our children, then what are we talking about really? I mean, it's not just about, packaging something, and it's just then very superficial, because education has to be about opening up the mind, opening up the heart of the child, and then disseminating the knowledge which can be transferred into real life situations. How do you do this? How do you conduct yourself when people are different from you? How do you agree to disagree? These are things which need to be taught. These are 21st century skills. And that's what we do very consciously through our curricula and through our daily school life. So for example, each month we have one IB principle we take up. Last month it was communication and how we talk, how the non-verbal communication, and of course the hostility that exists sometimes in communication without us, how we write mails. Mail etiquette is something that we teach children, because there are people who go into the professional world don't know how to write a mail. And,
yes, and also who still use SMS lingo in some very formal communication.
And they get into very confrontational situations. So I have seen small things becoming a big conflict because of poor communication. So that we worked on. Then we are working on being principled. Being principled is that you have all these information which is easily available, but you don't cut, copy, paste. You have your original thinking. There's academic integrity. So each month we take up something, and so the content is one part of our teaching. It is not the only part. So we understand there are certain facts that need to be learned, certain strategies that need to be learned, but along with it, there's a whole lot of other skills that are developed which go into making a child international minded and a global citizen. Thank you.
Thank you, Pallavi.
Divya, I just wanted to come there. So,
Please.
I mean, yes, of course, Miss Pallavi, knows how to put the things all comprehensive together so beautifully. And that reminded me the other day, one of our new children, new students, new joiners, this child came and spoke to me, and he said, I love the place where I am right now, ma'am. The school is beautiful. When I spoke to him, there was a lot of, he had to describe a lot of things in terms of academics, the way, he used to be studying, and now the experiential learning that he's having here. And that point of time, this child told me, ma'am, have you heard about the Chinese proverb? So the proverb says, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. So he exactly pointed out how, you work on our skills and make us, empowered for life.
It's amazing how kids see these things.
Absolutely. So when ma'am was talking, this was just going on in my mind, how.
And they have been empowered to share that, right? Both in the home environment and the school
absolutely.
environment.
The freedom, the student agency, that's like, out there.
Absolutely, yeah. Bindu or Pallavi, could you also tell us about the second language problem, if I might call it that, for, because probably they've not done Hindi, especially written or Kannada.
That's absolutely fine, Divya. And we have we get students who have not done Hindi. So we offer Spanish, French, and Hindi. And children choose anyone. And the way it is designed is that you can actually, if you choose to learn it, you can, because there are 3 phases that run in each of these languages: beginner, intermediary, and advanced. So if there's a pre-assessment that happens, and on that pre-assessment, say if I've come to the school and I choose French, then the French teacher takes a pre-assessment. Based on that, they recommend that you should go for intermediary, or you should go for a beginner or advanced, and then from there on you carry on. And there's a lot of freedom to change your language. So it's not like once you choose a language, you have to graduate in that language. Say you are unable to catch on. But we do recommend parents that you should choose a language which you speak at home, because that will definitely support in the learning, because language needs an environment. It can't be just learned through a book. So there are parents who come from European countries who prefer then that, yes, French is great or Spanish is great, or, who want to go back, the whole passports there. So they definitely choose that. Then there are some, expat parents who want to learn the state language because they feel this is a great opportunity. They are here for 2 years. So we offer Kannada also for those who want to learn about the Kannada, the culture. So there's a whole variety of options, and there is no restrictions. It's very, very in terms of how we understand our children want to learn. We go about designing it like that. But yes, for example, in the middle of the year, we don't recommend a change, because when you start learning something, it takes time. It's not like you start becoming fluent in it in 1 month. It might take a year. So we say that, okay, just be patient. Let the child go through 1 year cycle. And then if they don't learn it, then you change the language.
So this beginner, intermediate, and advanced, is that something for each year? Or because perhaps the child is like in 3rd grade when they move, or like 6th grade when they move, and how is this beginner, intermediate decided? Is it like for each grade, or is it like an overarching, like in this language, the child falls in this?
Yeah, it's a combination of the two. So most often it just, it becomes a great thing. But for example, say somebody comes from a country where the child speaks Spanish and has spoken Spanish for 7-8 years, and they can be part of the advanced group. And so they might be, but there are timetable challenges where we cannot just club them with a higher grade. But that's one way of doing it. Or, even giving them very advanced, access to different platforms, online platforms. We have Century Tech, and Century Tech allows children to learn things, independently in a self-directed way, and where they can keep challenging themselves. So languages, we have not introduced on that, but English, math, and science we are doing right now. But definitely it is something that the intermediary, the beginner, intermediary, and advanced allows students to make very informed choices, and also to see a measurable progress over the year. So there are times when children come to the beginner level, move on to advanced as well. Advanced is when you start doing literature in that language. And intermediary is when you're, of course, doing comprehension. So beginning could be just learning the alphabets of that language, learning to frame 3-letter sentences, 3-word sentences, and then later on moving on like that. So that's how progressive it is. And it does, give a lot of options. And in IB, there's another thing for second languages, which is self-taught. So for example, say somebody comes with German, or even Cantonese, some language which is not offered in our school. So they can go for the option of self-taught, where the child, is mentored by a teacher from our school, but may have an external tutor, is also allowed to write exam for on our registration, and can go ahead and do a self-taught course in a language. So that kind of flexibility is there in the curriculum.
Okay, so there are a lot of options for language, which I might not have, expected this kind of a progress, especially if I'm coming back after like 10 or 15 years. And my last exposure was when I was a student, and they said, if you get it wrong, like you got to write it 10 times.
That approach is gone. We do not have anything like rote learning. We have a series of provocative questions, a unit of inquiry in primary, you have all inquiry based. So the way lesson planning happens is very, very futuristic and innovative. So a lesson plan includes definitely 3 factors. What is teacher led, what is through student interaction, what is technology driven. So 40 minutes can have a variety of these 3 factors, which allows, so it takes away monotony, it creates vibrancy in the class, and it also has definitely an impact on the child, the way they learn.
Very cool. Ms. Bindu, this question is for you. In terms of academic rigor and perhaps even assessments, what can, parents expect? Again, in the context of R2I, wherein, perhaps the assessment has not been as strenuous, or, parents and children as driven by grades. Perhaps it's possible, but everywhere in the world we do have people who pursue the grades. But how would you say it goes in your school?
Right. So Divya, again, it's a very student friendly program. We have a very strong scope and sequence in place when it comes to whether it's PYP, MYP, DP. The curriculum is absolutely brilliant, stands definitely, over and above at par with, it's a very strong curriculum. What we have done as a school at Oak Ridge, Bangalore, is we have gone ahead, mapped our curriculum to all the national curriculum and international curriculum. That makes us even more, adaptable. So the children who come from, say, Common Core, or from Singapore, or from one of our CBSE schools, yes, in terms of skills, in terms of the conceptual, the methodology of learning, they might find it a little different because, we have a very experiential approach. But curriculum, they don't find it difficult to adapt. We do, as Ms. Pallavi mentioned, we do have a pre-assessment in place where we, first we conduct the pre-assessment, and based on that, we assess the learning gaps of the child. We understand, okay, a grade 4 student, if he has joined us mid-year, probably he's coming from one of the magnet schools. But yes, all the English may not be as distinct. Probably the science is slightly ahead there. We do a pre-assessment, we bridge the gap and make sure the transition happens very smooth as soon as possible. So this all takes about 6 weeks of time of observation and getting the child into the system quickly. That's how we work on it. Now, assessments are an integral part. So when we talk about the curriculum, it's the written curriculum, the taught curriculum, and the assessed curriculum. So that shows that how important assessment is to us. Again, gone are the days, the way we have taken pen and paper tests. It is, I will not say it's not there, it's important for us, but there's a lot of strategies and tools that we employ to kind of, assess the children. Observational assessments, teacher anecdotes, peer assessments are a great methodology as well. Children learn from children, right? So that is something that we do. The formatives. Formative is to inform the teacher where she is at the path of her learning during the learning process. So if, for example, I'm doing a concept on fraction and after a week, the teacher takes up a formative assessment, she exactly knows where each of her learners stands in terms of, her improving. Formative is very much to inform the teacher where she, either if she has to change her methodology or how should she proceed to make sure that her learners are meeting all the outcomes of the program. That's how it goes. And summative, of course, at the end of it, we take a summative assessment to ensure, but we don't close at summative. Again,
Okay.
if there are gaps, the teacher makes sure that the gaps are bridged and the child is ready to go to the next concept.
Okay.
That's how we function.
So it's more of like a rolling assessment throughout the year and
Throughout the
more-
year.
and more intended for like seeing where the gaps are, for the gaps to
Absolutely.
be filled and not for the gaps to be pointed out, so to speak.
And there is one big advantage to the entire way the assessment is structured. Our children are a part of our assessments. There is a lot of, they can, suggest the teacher how would they like their summative assessment to be planned. They can plan the rubric for the summative assessment. So that is something that's very, very impressive. A 10-year-old, 12-year-old sitting and working on a rubric on how the assessment can be worked on.
That in itself would be an experience for them.
Right. I would request ma'am, Pallavi ma'am, to add to that.
I do have a question for Pallavi, based on what you said about how IB is mapped to other our national curriculum, but I would also like to know how IB compares to like other local schools in other countries. So, we do see like people taking up IB who have moved back. And then sometimes, for whatever reason, there is reverse R2I, as it is called, wherein they go back or, progress to another country. So how do you think it compares to other local boards in other countries?
Yeah. So Divya, whenever we have parent orientations, I begin by telling the parents, your students, your children will not learn the way you were taught unless you divest yourself of that old methodology and you imagine there should be so much homework because I wrote it. The teacher should be so strict or not so strict because, we have to really get rid of because what worked at that time will not work at this time and in the future. That's one thing we have to establish and accept. Having said that, now whether, how IB is connected, I would say IB is leaps and bounds ahead of its times, and that's why it has become so popular. Establishes a completely new way of approaching teaching and learning because, like Ms. Bindu just shared, the student agency voice and choice is extremely prominent, unlike any other curricula in India or abroad. WASC is there, the American one, but even there, how there was in between a major research movement about a Superman coming and rescue us. It's because it tends to become very, very inundated in over research, like too much, whether this will work for the children or not. Whereas IB has already proven, it has a proven track record of success across the world, across different cultures and different countries. And in that sense, that's why even our own national education policy is modeled on that, and they are trying to sort of replicate it in a lesser cost. Because what Nitasha was earlier mentioning, that it's a prohibitive cost. The thing is that because it may seem high within our country because our currency is smaller, but remember the schools in India who run IB have to pay the board fees in the US dollars. So they have a different fee structure because they have to pay the annual fee for running the school to the board, and you cannot do it if you don't have. So there are many such restrictions, and also the kind of things, the subjects it opens up. You may not have, say, a certain traditional school. Am I audible?
Yes.
You are.
I think Natasha was trying to say something.
Oh, sorry, Natasha, please.
But she is muted.
Okay.
No, no, please continue. Please continue.
So, and the kind of things it offers, for example, we have theater being studied as a subject or dance being studied as a subject. These are vocational skills that children are developing. Then they have the option of using the career program where after grade 12th, you don't go straight into college. You do a 2-year vocational course, which is what now the Indian government is also trying to bring in. So in that sense, it is definitely ahead of its times. It's very visionary program. And another thing with IB is it does not rest on its laurels. We are updating and upgrading yearly. So as an evaluation leader right now, I'm going through a whole lot of workshops. I've done 21 years of IB, but that doesn't mean that I know it all. In fact, it really makes you a lifelong learner because you realize you don't know anything. You keep on learning more. And right now, when I was in part of this, right after this, I have to get back to my workshop again. We have to look at how our approach should be always aspirational and never definitive. This is what we have done. This is what we've achieved. This is where we stop. No, because we are living in an environment which is rapidly changing. So when you're living in a rapidly changing environment, you cannot have like conclusions on how you do things. You have to constantly evolve and adapt to the situation. So yes, Divya, I feel it is something which the students will validate, who have come from different curricula across the world. When they come into the IB, the freedom, creative freedom. Freedom does not mean that they don't have to study or they don't have to do written work. All of that is there. But the approach is so sophisticated that without imposing, it prods the child forward. It just keeps on nudging and in the right direction. And that takes a whole lot of patience. Because it's so easier to
I
tell,
don't doubt that.
I told you so this is the
Yes.
answer.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
doesn't work with IB. So you have to keep on asking questions, and so leadership, it develops the leadership of each child very naturally, because you become a self-directed learner.
Ma'am, in the interest of time, we are taking questions from the audience.
Can I just say something here?
Sure, Natasha, just one moment.
Yeah,
I just want to,
no, not just a
we are
point.
taking questions from the audience. So if you do have any questions, please put that in so that we could, try to get to it before the session wraps up. Over to you, Natasha. Thank you for waiting.
Yeah, no problem. So I think, Pallavi, you really summed it up beautifully when you talked about the IB curriculum, and I myself being a parent from an international school, I totally agree that, how the IB curriculum really prepares a child holistically. And that is very important in the formative or the school years of a child's life. But another concern that, again, I'm speaking on behalf of the rest of the parents that I'm here representing, is how does the IB curriculum really prepare a child? I'm now wearing Divya's hat. How does the IB curriculum really prepare a child who does not want to go abroad, to study engineering or medicine or any of the conventional courses, and they want to continue their undergraduate studies? That is a big mindset that, a lot of parents feel that if I put my child in IB, then I have to send him abroad. So if you can just share your thoughts on that, please.
Thank you so much for that question, Natasha. It's a very important question you've asked, and I take great happiness in busting this myth. There is no such thing that IB means you have to go abroad. You don't have to do anything. So stats prove that. Each year, if you look up at the stats, there are 60% who stay back, 40% who go abroad. It is not that 100% of our students, but 60% of our students go to very good universities. Many go to Christ University, Delhi University, Symbiosis, Manipal. They also study medicine. And in that sense, it is not what is generally imagined that IB means you will go abroad. But yes, because our students largely belong to certain, demographics which can afford to send their children abroad, they prefer it, because in India, the admissions are very competitive. You may or you may not get it. And All India University Forum, which is the formal body, it has absolute acceptance of IB grades. And we have also got a provisional certificate, because our exam results come out in August, and the admissions here happen in June. So there is a provisional certificate, a document which the colleges accept. So all kinds of tie-ups and things have happened already with the government, where it's very smooth for children who choose to stay. So this year we had, the batch that just graduated, we had students going to UCLA, UCS, Berkeley, but we also had students going to Ashoka and, Christ University and Delhi University. So it really depends on the personal choice and what's the right fit. So we have a very strong guidance counselors team and Cialfo online platform, which helps students make these choices. Sorry, Divya, I'm sorry.
No, it was a very important question, and it does bring out like the perception that is there. Okay, why did you put an IB? You've already moved back. Are you going to move back? Is that why you're an IB? But it doesn't have to be that way. It is great to bring that in the discussion. Natasha, my next and perhaps final question is to you. Just knowing what you now know and seeing the queries of other parents, and just as a general, thought, what do you think? What kind of support do you think parents can expect from a school, and what parents should be asking, like some questions when they are moving back? Like, does your school provide support for X, Y, and Z? Can you think of some things like that? And again, that also puts the question of what are the parents, what is the onus of the parent to handle in this move as well, right?
See, I think for making the R2I move successful, the most important thing for every parent is the successful integration of the child into the school system.
Oh yeah.
That is, dominant on everybody's mind. And the point is that a lot of parents, like we've already discussed most of the points, the concerns are about language integration, about cultural, whether, my child has a very strong accent, he cannot speak, or a lot of the children may not understand him. Will he be bullied because of his accent? So those are a lot of concerns. And I think talking on behalf of the parents, it's important for the schools and the parents to have an open dialogue or be open to these kind of dialogues. The academic integration, I think a lot of us are quite comfortable. We know what we are going into because this is where we came from. So we kind of accept whether we choose an IB board or we choose a local state board or a CBSE board. We know that being in India, being part of the Indian ecosystem, the pressure is there. Whether it is self-imposed or it's imposed by the school, a lot of the academic pressure is there. So, but being able to have an open dialogue about the concerns that the language concerns, like Pallavi was just busted the myth about that I have to send my child abroad. No, and because it's another prohibitive cost sending the child abroad after grade 12. So those things, I think if we have those open discussions the way this forum has allowed us to do, I think that will be a very big sigh of relief to a lot of parents who are moving back to India. So that's what I have to say.
Okay.
Natasha seems to be very passionate in what she's doing, and we are all there with you. Don't worry. And you can convey this to your parents as well.
Thank you, Ms. Bindu.
Yeah, I mean, Natasha has been putting in a lot of her time into the process of answering these questions. So of course she feels quite strongly. Also because your kids also moved when they were in their primary years.
One was in primary, grade 2, and the other was in middle school. So I faced both ends of the settlement process.
And it is a lot about asking the school for the right kind of support, for related to culture, and perhaps also making ourselves aware and coming with an open mind to say there are, like you mentioned, the academic rigor. It could just be self-imposed because there is this thing schools like Bay Area where there is quite a good amount of Indian and Chinese population, not to typecast, but over there the academic rigor is so high that sometimes parents move back because it is too rigorous there. So maybe it is all not coming from the school. There is a certain amount of what are we doing to facilitate this move and this process for the child. Thank you so much, Pallavi, Bindu, and Natasha for taking these questions and throwing light on some of the like busting some myths, throwing light on things that we weren't aware of, and overall sharing your valuable time and insight with us. I hope the R2I families that watch this get some of their worries quelled and questions answered. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
everyone. Natasha, Divya, Ms. Bindu.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank you so
Bye.
much, all of you, for being here. Thank you, Divya, Natasha, Pallavi, and Bindu, for accepting our invite and being part of it. And a very, very special thanks to the Oak Ridge team for collaborating with us as the title sponsors and being supportive. And thank you so much, Pallavi and Bindu, for that. And Natasha and team for the R2I work that you're doing. Phenomenal job. Thank you so much, Divya, again, for moderating it beautifully well. And I'm very sure it will be a learning lesson for quite a lot of parents who are looking at this as a specific topic. And this will definitely be on the recording also, so people can watch it later as well. So big thanks to all of you. We will take a break now, and we will resume the next session at 2 o'clock. And that session is going to be a very interesting one on NEP and its impact on education right from preschool to college. We have two experts who have been part of the NEP implementation committee coming in as expert speakers on that, and that's going to be moderated by Sandhya Vishwan herself. So look forward to seeing you at 2 o'clock. Till then, thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Manoj.
Bye.
Thank you.